Anyhow, my guest here is Robert Bassano, and we'll do the introduction. How are you, Robert?
I'm good. I'm good. You?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. I'm very excited to have you. There seems to be I guess everyone's aware there's an awakening of some sort of foot, but what I am seeing is a whole new vanguard of scientific minds willing to challenge the things we've been told all these decades. Sorry, I'm trying to get my phone off here. But anyhow, I just did a show with Brian Mullen, which I'm going to release, and he's an engineer who announced within a 24-hour period of me announcing that we believe space is some sort of liquid. Now, can you quickly describe for people the video that you published 2 weeks ago? And I will preface it by saying I know it's been mirrored in a lot of places. I first saw it labeled with a title that said something to the effect of "Grad Student Proves the Hubble Space Telescope is a Lie." But anyhow, can you please give us the original title of that video and where it is posted?
Well, the original title of the video, there were two videos that were put out. The first one was the NASA Deputy Team Program Manager has never seen Hubble in real time in 25 years. And then, based on the information that he shared with me in our telephone conversation, I did, because I did a reference comparison to the Hubble Space Telescope and SOFIA, which is the Stratospheric Observatory partnership between NASA and the German Space Agency. And SOFIA has a nearly identical technical construction and specifications as Hubble.
So wait a minute. Let me stop you right there just to make sure we let people understand. Basically, what you're saying is, in your professional career, and I want to preface this by saying I believe Robert's involved in machine learning, artificial intelligence, and some very high-end things. He's a grad student. I believe, Robert, you're still working on your master's degree, right?
Yeah, I'm a first-year grad student, and astrophysics and this type of science has never been my mainstream interest in academia. My undergraduate education is in the area of intelligence, intelligence research, but it brought me to this area. So I'm pursuing a graduate degree in systems engineering and conducting the research on developing advanced systems regarding machine learning, neural networking, took me to the area of image processing, whereby I started looking into working on a research paper into advanced image processing of objects in the sky and allowing a machine to actually autonomously identify particular objects, to tell you what their structure was, the composition, distance, so on and so forth.
Which is what got you looking at the purported Hubble images, correct?
Yeah, I started looking at the Hubble images, and as I was going through conducting my searches, I found a lot of data on NASA's website. I found data on Google, and then I started to look through the university system for other type of videography and photographic imagery, and I stumbled across SOFIA, and I said, wait a minute, I've seen this image before. And that's when the comparative analysis I was conducting with the images from SOFIA's website and Hubble, and I started matching up identical photos. So then I started looking into the background to see, okay, when were these photos taken? And I found a few particular photos where SOFIA took the same images as Hubble on the same exact day.
And we should clue people in. The SOFIA is basically an airplane. I think it's a 747. Robert will correct me if I say anything wrong here. But what I was beginning to point out before Robert started describing this is what Robert discovered was that, for lack of better terms, there's basically an identical telescope on the SOFIA. It's one of many different systems the SOFIA can run, but it's pretty much identical in capability to the Hubble Space Telescope. So let me throw it back to you now that you are finding an image that is identical taken by SOFIA and the Hubble taken on the same day.
Yeah, the image in question was the MG84 supernova. Um, I found images that were taken by both assets, both telescopes, on the same day. As a matter of fact, there were three photos. There was one taken from a ground observatory, there was one taken from Sophia, and there was one taken from Hubble, and they were all on the same day. And interestingly enough, the image from Sophia was better clarity. It was higher definition than the one from Hubble. Hubble's supposed to be at 330 plus miles above the ISS, 100 miles above the ISS, and Sophia is flying at 45,000 feet in a special purpose 747, flying at 500 miles plus an hour. And that's when I started digging into Hubble. So I was looking at a lot of the information. All the information I obtained was off of NASA's website. I went through their website, with as best a fine-tooth comb as I could possibly find, and I went onto the human spaceflight section of their website, and I found out, I pulled up STS-31, and it had some data in there, and it showed a photo of current director Charlie Bolden as the mission commander for STS-31. And in the caption of the photo, it says, "Here is Charlie Bolden, inside the shuttle in the cargo bay, fixing all of the spacesuits. The EVA was canceled for this mission, and they were carrying the Hubble." So I'm thinking, wait a minute, the EVA was canceled for the mission, meaning no one went out there to literally push Hubble out into orbit. So there's no way the STS would have gotten to 330 miles. So, and then I started looking a little bit deeper, and I'm like, okay, let me see if I can find some videos on YouTube. Every video you see on YouTube, even put out by NASA, it shows, the launch on April 24th, 1990. It shows, space activity inside the STS with them talking about it. What you see on the video, what looks like Hubble, they show the arm moving, and they're trying to take it out of the cargo bay, and then you don't see anything else. You see videos of servicing missions, and I wasn't putting into question too much of the servicing missions, but I said, okay, let me look into this a little bit more. So then I discovered an international database called FAI, the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale. It's FAI.org. And this organization existed before NASA. They were created, I think, in the 1940s. Theodore von Karman, and if no one knows who that is, the Karman line was named after him. He and a bunch of other physicists and scientists got together. They had this big conference in Switzerland, or Austria, I think, and they wanted to define where space actually begins. And they collectively agreed that they were going to put out an international standard of where space actually began, and they decided it was going to be at 100 kilometers, which is 328,082 feet from the surface center of the Earth. So,
and that is dubbed the Karman line, right?
That's dubbed the Karman line, yes.
So that's the reference that you just made of the name Karman. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so give or take, that could change a couple of thousand feet, because you have the solar cycle where the atmosphere expands and contracts. So there could be a time during the solar cycle where the atmosphere expands, and you may have to fly at a higher altitude, maybe 330,000 feet, maybe 340,000 feet, who knows? But if you're going to trust the data that you see on telemetry with NASA, I'm going to tell you here right now, you can't trust that data, because it can be spoofed. It can be faked. You can put in the software programming, and it shows you what you believe to be the telemetry data, but there's no way to actually definitively verify that's where they actually have gone to. But interestingly enough, the DoD classifies space at 80 kilometers, which is about 262,000 plus feet. Now, NASA, I'm not sure if they're determining space to be 262,000 or 328,000. Regardless of that, when I went looking in the FAI database and I typed in I went to FAI.org, I went to space records. Now, something that needs to be cleared up here. Just because it says space records on their website, that doesn't mean that a record needs to be set. Okay? Because if that particular section of the website clearly states that, oh, this is only for records that have been set, then why would you put the servicing missions in there? Because there are a lot of missions that were done, that were initiated by NASA, where there was no record set at all. You know that if someone traveled at a distance, someone else broke that record. There's records broken all the time. But you keep the older records in there. Now, Hubble technically was supposed to weigh 25,000. I've seen a different weight of 27,000. It's 43 and a half feet tall, okay? And I think it's about 43, give or take. Put it this way, there was about a foot and a half, maybe 2 feet of space inside the cargo bay of the shuttle, meaning that the Hubble would have barely fit inside of this thing, okay, in the cargo bay of the shuttle. When I go type in STS-31, no results, okay? So I type it in different, no results. I typed it in 3 different ways. So then I type in the name of of every single crew member for STS-31. No one's name popped up, no results. Then I said, okay, I can't find this. So I typed in the year, April 24th, 1990. Okay? Nothing on the Earth left the Earth in the year 1990.
So is STS-31 supposedly them bringing the Hubble into orbit? Is that what
that was the mission? April 24th, 1990 was when Hubble supposedly launched from Cape Canaveral and went up into space with 27,000-pound payload.
So you're looking for the record of the initial launch that would have left planet Earth.
Yeah, it should have set a record. Exactly.
Yeah, right. But not just set a record, it's also taking the Hubble up for the first time to supposedly place it in orbit.
Yeah, to place it in orbit. And this is, of course, before they discovered the mirror aberration. So then I started typing in. I just went through the entire database. I said, okay, I'm gonna need to click on every single variable of this launch. We know it was a heavy payload, so I said, okay, let me click greatest mass lifted to greatest altitude. You would figure 27,000 pounds could be a large mass in 1990 lifted to the highest altitude, which was 330 miles.
Yeah, you'd think.
Nothing. So I said, okay, let me make a telephone call to FAI.org. Let me ask them about this, because this could just be some sort of database system error. Maybe there's something wrong with my system. So I cleaned my system, I cleared cookies, caches, I restarted everything, did a security audit, all of that. Logged back in again, tried it out again, okay? And I was getting the same results. So finally, a week later, I get an email back from FAI asking, and they answered. They said, I'm sorry, but the information you provided us, we have no records of this mission, right? So,
holy smokes. On the face of it, on the face of what you were saying, is that the actual mission that would have brought the Hubble telescope into space for the first time to place it in orbit, to do what it was supposed to do, there's no record of that mission.
Yeah, they said there was no record. But the guy said to me in the email, he says, could you provide me some additional data? So I said, okay, and I sent him the link for the Hubble Space Telescope. I sent him the mission data that's on NASA's website, kind of summarizing the mission. And then I went a little bit further, okay? The UN, the United Nations, has a space administration. Everything that's launched off the surface of this Earth, okay, that's going to be propelled into the sky and for space, has to be registered with the UN.
You're kidding.
I'm not kidding you. I can give you the link. You can go to the UN's website. I put a video up about this, okay? And you can go to the website and you can check it for yourself. Okay, I put a video up about it, and I'll give that to you later.
Yeah.
But I went to the UN, and it showed, and literally, you see the list. The United States registered the launch, okay? And then it goes in the description. It tells you the description of the object that was launched into space. So it says, it was a space vehicle carrying people. There was just disposable, rockets that were disposed of, and then non-functional objects. That's what it classifies. So
it didn't say anything about a telescope.
No, it said nothing about a telescope.
Wow.
Now, I needed to do comparison. So I decided to enter in the nomenclature and the ID for another telescope that they claim to be out there, okay, which is Chandra, the Chandra telescope. That's that
Yeah.
video that's titled Flat Earth 747 Sophia, the Real Hubble, and Chandra telescope. So the Chandra telescope launched 9 years after Hubble. So I'm starting to think to myself, wait a minute, why would you send another telescope up there that could do the same thing as Hubble 9 years later? I'm like, so immediately I'm thinking, oh, wait a minute. Now I'm getting some evidence to prove Hubble doesn't exist, and they might have brought it back down because they put up a more advanced telescope that happened to be out in the same area where Hubble should have been.
Except you can't even find the original manifest record or indication of any kind that a high-tech telescope that barely fit in the space shuttle was launched into orbit in the first place. I'd say that's pretty good evidence on its own.
Yeah, that's and then I had to make sure because, I asked them, could you please check again, please? I said, what's the procedure for submitting, information to FAI to have something put in the database? He says, well, we get information from the agency who's giving us the data to be launched. They give us the mission data after they've come back, and usually the guy says within 3 to 6 months it's put into the database, and he said it's registered and certified as a record. I said, okay, so you're saying nothing was ever submitted? He says, well, I went to go look into the archive files. There's no file there. There's no paper file. I said, okay. So I left it at that. When I go to the UN Space Agency and I look up Hubble and I see that they don't even describe the telescope, but then when I look up Chandra, it actually describes what Chandra is supposed to be looking at. And here's the shocking thing that I haven't revealed to anyone yet. You'll be the first one I revealed it to. When you go to the UN Space Agency's website, okay?
Yeah.
When you go to the UN Space Agency's website and you enter in Chandra, Chandra is supposed to be looking at the sky, at stars, okay?
Okay.
Chandra is not looking at the stars.
What the hell is it looking at?
Okay, I'm going to read to you exactly what Chandra is going through. But, while I'm doing that, I'll finish talking about Hubble. So that's why I decided to make the telephone call to HST. So I wanted to ask about this. And I made the call cold so that everyone could see it and no one could accuse me of, oh, this is all fake, you staged this, yada, yada, yada. I called down the phone list. And I got a hold of the deputy program manager and, said my name and what I was interested in doing. And yeah, what I'm interested in doing is bona fide. And, I am working on advanced imaging processing application. And we just basically had a conversation about this. And he said in the 25 years that he had been, with the program, he'd never seen Hubble in real time. He said he had only seen the servicing missions.
Now, is this the Sophia guy or the Chandra guy?
No, this is the Hubble guy.
This is the Hubble guy. So wait a minute. This is an actual. Okay, so wait a minute. I got lost there for a second. What is his title? What is his gig?
Okay, Mike Maslinsky is the deputy program manager, operations manager for the Hubble Space Telescope.
Okay, I'm caught up. Gotcha. And so what you're saying is when he's never seen it, I mean, what are we talking about? He's never seen data collected. He's never seen, live images, raw images.
He's seen data collected, of course, because it's sending down signal and telemetry data, to let them know what the health of the assets is supposed to be. But he never saw Hubble get put inside.
I see. Okay.
The STS cargo bay.
Gotcha.
He said he's seen servicing missions, but he didn't clarify if those servicing missions were actually being viewed in real time. Okay. And for me, for someone who's questioning if we even go to space, there's no telling. Those images could have been from anywhere.
That's right.
Okay. And to let you know, they have a green screen in the aqua training tank.
Which I have seen, and I have, since I initially found that, I've tried to find good images to make people aware. They hide the hell out of that green screen. As a matter of fact, I think it rolls up or something into a little tube because most of the images where you could get a peek at it are now not so easy to find.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right about that. And the thing is that I've got photos showing them, the astronauts underwater, putting the new cameras inside the Hubble. They're supposed to be, these new cameras. And when you match that up with the photo that they claim that they actually did it in space,
yep,
it's perfect. Now, you'll have people to debate that. It says, oh, the reason why it's perfect because that's why they practice in the pool, so it could be exactly the way they did it on the ground. Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with that. But when you do photo forensic analysis, okay, you could see where there's problems. You could see people talking about space bubbles and everything like that. That issue, regarding space, I know we'll talk about that. But heading over to Sophia on this, how I ended up talking with Nicholas Veronico of the Sophia program, and we got into details of what Sophia can do, what the telescope can do, and he says, yeah, we have a 250 micron IR capability to see things in variable wavelengths.
So in other words, what he's telling you, just so people understand, is a telescope on a 747 flying at high altitude has a better ability to pick up things in the infrared than the Hubble Space Telescope does in space.
Yeah, he was very specific. He said that Hubble had a 5 micron capability. I think he said it was like 2.5 to 5 micron capability at 330 miles with literally very limited atmosphere. And he said Sophia, flying at 45,000, had a 250 micron capability, flying at 45,000 feet, looking through 4 to 5 different layers of atmosphere.
And not only that, I mean, you're going to end up having to bring up the damn Van Allen belts and all that other nonsense because you're looking through all that.
Yeah, that's another. Van Allen, I can tell you some things about him that'll probably shock you because I got a hold of some of his files from the University of Iowa, and he falsified his research. He never got a rocket to 2,400 kilometers and 10,000 kilometers.
Well, I mean, we should stick on point for now, but
the
Van Allen belts is just more poppycock, just more nonsense.
It's just weird. It's just weird.
Yeah.
So Nick starts to describe to me everything that Sophia can do. So I brought up the question to him. I said, you know what? Let's do an apples and oranges, because he says, what Sophia can do and what Hubble can do is apples and oranges. I say, well, which one's the apples? Which one's the oranges? And we started giggling and laughing about it. And he says to me that when I asked him, I said, well, hey, I saw a photo taken on a specific day of the MG84 supernova, right? He says, yeah, I know about that. I said, you do? I said, well, can you explain to me how Sophia took the same exact picture of Hubble on the same day of the same exact object in space? He goes, yeah, I can do that. He says, I was on that mission. I said, on that mission? You mean you were on board Sophia when you took that photo? He says, yeah, we did that.
Jackpot.
And I said, I was saying to myself, oh my God, I can't believe he just said that. And it confirmed what I had already believed. So I took my own, of course, my accusation and analysis and theory, and I had someone confirm it for me, and that's all I needed to confirm. That's all I needed to confirm. And when he told me that Sophia it has 7 different instruments, telescopes. He said 7, he couldn't tell me which telescopes, but he says they had 7. He sent me the list of telescopes. And some of them have different nomenclature names. Like, you're not going to see the common names you think were launched on rockets. But I can tell you, looking at the technical specs, every space telescope they claim that's out there is not out there. It's actually on Sophia. Now, I'm not going to say every single one, but he says they can retrofit and change out the telescopes every 2 days. It takes them 2 days to change it out and put in a different one.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it for you. Nothing goes above what we call low Earth orbit, including machines. But I mean, I've got to ask you, you saw the list of, so let me back up a second. So people listening understand what Robert just said was the Hubble Space Telescope doesn't exist. He demonstrated at least 3 good reasons why you can prove that. but then he correlated it with the Sophia, which is a 747 flying at high altitude using an almost identical telescope, which is apparently even a little better than the supposed fake Hubble telescope. But of the seven, and I'm sorry, so what's being said here is Robert is saying there would even be no need for a Hubble Space Telescope because Sophia could take any of the images in the first place. Yeah. But you saw the 7 types of scopes. Are any of them optical? Are any of them human eye visibility?
I'm not sure on that.
You're not sure?
Something I want to, yeah, because I'm still looking at the technical spec data, and I'm trying to compare it to other stuff that they claim that's out there. But well,
what I was wondering is because, back in the 90s when I first got my first scope, and I believed at the time Hubble was real, and got a film camera and spent hours tracking stars trying to get my own mini Hubble images before I started to realize it's all nonsense. As I began to research those images even back then, what you find is nearly none of it is even claimed to be in the visual spectrum in the first place.
Well, the interesting thing I wanted to clarify is this, is that Sophia's program, the 747, came online, I think, in early 2000, okay? So anyone wanting to challenge if Hubble exists, because it launched in 1990,
and then had bad eyes, right? It had bad eyes. They had to go correct it, supposedly. So there's even a longer gap time there that works in the favor of your argument.
Well, the interesting thing is this. Even I found a video online that was put out by the National Science Foundation regarding Antarctic balloon launches. And they provide a chart of, a graph chart showing, on the left-hand side it shows altitude, and the bottom, horizontal line shows payload weights that a balloon would be able to carry a specific object to a specific altitude for a specific amount of time. And if people look up the EBEX experiment on YouTube or online, they launched an 8,000-pound telescope, which was probably 2/3 the size of Hubble, on a balloon. It looked nearly identical to Hubble. It was almost 1/3, maybe 2/3 the size of Hubble. 8,000-pound telescope. They took it to about 130,000, 150,000 feet in Antarctica.
Wow.
The balloon program is older than the space program. We have been using balloons for aerial reconnaissance, intelligence, and surveillance longer than NASA has been in existence.
Right. I mean, there's the whole Picard thing that's coming to light now, which probably gave the name to the Star Trek captain. But it's also being used in a Hennessy commercial, which demonstrates space is liquid, and that there's I don't know whether you want to call it a firmament, I call it a barrier, that there's some sort of a barrier up there. But anyhow, go ahead.
Well, yes, I've said the Hubble doesn't exist because it's not in any official database. And to go back to what you had asked me before about Chandra, the official document I'm looking at right now, published on the UN's website. The website is unosa.org. Okay? When you go to the online index of objects launched into outer space, you don't have to have any record. It's every object ever launched is in this database with the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. When I pull up the data on Chandra, which was launched 23rd July 1999, it went to an apogee of 72,064 kilometers. The general function of the space object is described as, and this is Chandra.
Yep.
Spacecraft engaged in investigation of spacecraft techniques and technology.
Read that one more time.
Spacecraft engaged in investigation of spacecraft techniques and technology.
That's a hell of a way to word telescope.
No, get this. It says what the function of the space object was supposed to be. Chandra is supposed to be looking out at the universe, at stars and nebulas and all this other nonsense. They describe it as a spacecraft that is looking at another spacecraft and how it's performing and what type of technology.
Wow.
based on my interpretation, my own interpretation. People can go online and look at this for themselves. This is telling me that Chandra is not up there looking at the universe. They're looking at another spacecraft.
Well, I mean,
at 72,064 kilometers.
That's incredible. I mean, when you began to word it, it was pretty clear that it wasn't describing any optical or otherwise device. But I'm guessing you're about to tell me that there is no entry for STS-31.
No, there's an entry for STS-31, but they don't describe it, and I'm going to type it in right now. And I'm going to tell you what they describe it as. I'm going to read it exactly as they say it.
Okay, and to refresh everyone's memory, that would have been the space shuttle mission that first brought the Hubble up into orbit.
Yep.
Or what we call orbit, which doesn't exist, in my view.
Okay, so they, and on the UN's website, they give you the external website data for Chandra, but they don't give you any external website data for Hubble.
Now, so who owns Chandra? Is that a NASA thing? Whose asset is that?
I think that's a NASA project. Yeah.
That's a NASA asset. Okay.
Yeah, that's a NASA asset. No, don't quote me exact on this. So I pull up the Hubble data, and I'm going to read to you the spacecraft function. Okay, spacecraft function. Let me see here. April, March. Okay, April 24th. This is what they classify the general function of that launch. It reached an apogee of 624 kilometers, okay, perigee of 610 kilometers, and the general function is research and exploration of the upper atmosphere or outer space.
Does it have a bill of lading? Does it tell you what they were carrying besides people?
No. No.
So there it is. I mean, on its own, that would stand up in court. You could make the argument with that alone, if that's documented everywhere like that and not just online, that the Hubble was never even, left.
And here's the interesting thing. They supposedly came back on the 30th, and they listed in the UN record, following objects achieved orbit since the last report, but are no longer in orbit as of 2400 Zulu time on 30 April 1990. And they classify the shuttle, STS-31, reusable space transportation system.
And that's it?
That's it.
What? So, I'm sorry, that's the 30th or the 31st? What day was the launch?
That was the 30th. The launch was the 24th of April. They supposedly came back on the 30th of April, 1990, at 2400 Zulu time, which they came back on the 29th. So you could say that came back that evening, and it was officially recorded as 2400 Zulu time the next day, which is the 30th of April.
Well, I think anyone in their right mind would ask if you could put a 747 up there, which could be outfitted with any number of telescopes that can take images that are listed as better, higher quality than a space telescope. Why in the hell would you even go for the expense of trying to put something in space? But there's one thing that we haven't really discussed. Do you remember when Bush the Jr., the donkey man, wanted to remove or quit servicing the Hubble Space Telescope, citing that it was too dangerous to continue to do so? But there was a public outcry from the science community that didn't allow him to do it. And if I had to guess, looking back on that now, they were trying to cover their tracks by saying it was too dangerous, we can't service this anymore, and they were going to erase it from history. But everyone screamed and yelled, you can't do that. And the reason they screamed and yelled was because of all these beautiful images that were fraudulent they'd been handed.
Well, here goes the additional link analysis, that I hope supports, the claim and proof that Hubble never left the ground. And here's the additional data that a lot of people didn't look at. Hubble, the cost of Hubble was $1.5 billion. Okay?
Jeez.
Now, the total program came out to around $2.5 billion because they had to fix the mirror. Actually, no, they didn't fix the mirror. They realized they couldn't fix it in space. That's what they claim. And they had these additional cameras developed, which was somewhere around half of maybe a couple of $100 million each.
And,
right?
and I have a feeling if you look at the launch time to the time that they put the glasses on and fixed it, that would further bolster your argument for the
Yeah,
Chandra. Yeah.
exactly. But
Yeah.
here's the interesting thing. When you always follow the money when it comes to fraud, okay? I found out, I researched how much Sophia cost. It cost the same amount of money it cost to build Hubble. It cost $1.5 billion to build Sophia. Now get this, it gets better. It gets better. So what I'm thinking is, I think I know what happened. They realized that Hubble, because see, every space object has to go into the Glenn Research vacuum chamber to undergo the same conditions it would be under when it was, if it ever gets launched into space, right? So they put it through those conditions. When you put it through those conditions, you have to test the systems to see if the thing will malfunction, right?
Yep.
So I think that when they put it in the Glenn Research Center, they identified the mirror aberration and says, oh my God, what are we going to do? So they went ahead with the launch, empty shuttle, okay? Empty shuttle. They went ahead with it. They posted on their own website, they scrubbed the EVA, the extravehicular activity. They canceled it, right? They didn't talk much about it. And what happened was they had to go to Congress to ask for another $1.5 billion to $2 billion to put it on a 747. I think that they gutted the original Hubble. They took all the components out of it. They built another mirror. They had to, because Hubble's mirror is supposed to be, I think, 2.5 meters, 2.7 or 2.5 meters. The Sophia mirror is just a little bit smaller than that, but the technical specs are identical. Literally, if you were to gut Hubble, you could look at the photos online and you would see those exact components inside that 747. They gutted it, put it on Sophia, and I don't know what's been sending them into telemetry data, but it's not the Hubble at 330 miles. And when I put together the mathematics to say, wait a minute, if this asset has no way of staying in orbit like you claim the ISS can do, because it has a propulsion system, that means if the ISS is losing altitude and gaining altitude, but the Hubble continues to degrade in altitude and it's undergoing increased atmospheric drag, based on the math and the time frame, Hubble should actually be in the ocean.
Yeah, but I mean, what you just described, I mean, I think I could give you a better, Columbo synopsis here. They took the money for Hubble. They never built it. They built a dummy model which got showed to the public. The reason for that is because nobody can go above low Earth orbit, and they knew they could never put it in space. And to top it off, like my last guest, Mr. Mullen, who's an engineer, is demonstrating why rockets and ion propulsion probably would not work in the vacuum as described if in fact space were a vacuum. But to take this further, they then went to Congress and got another billion, having pocketed the first billion, and all they made was a model, and they built an identical piece of equipment and put it on Sophia, a 747. But for some reason, the one they put on Sophia actually, from specs, could see a little bit better than the one that was supposed to be in space. The problem with this whole argument becomes, and you demonstrated it in the clip that first introduced me to you, was there was no damn way. There was orbital mechanical problems from the description and the math that we were handed in the first place, in the same way that the ISS suffers. The ISS gets away with the lie because of the ion propulsion boosters or whatever ridiculous, silliness they're telling us. But the fact remains, what you said is true. There were no thrusters, no boosters, no nothing on Hubble, which means by their own rules, its orbit will degrade and it will burn up.
Yeah. And the thing about it is this, is that, when I said these things to this guy I was talking to about the Hubble, he said, interesting. He didn't debate saying, no, you're wrong. It's still up there.
I couldn't get a sense of whether that guy was completely clueless or the best freaking straight face in the history of NASA.
You don't sit at a desk as deputy program manager for 25 years and never ask yourself this question. And he even said himself in the phone call with the guy about HST, he says, you know what? He says, why would we put a camera on it? I said, listen, Police departments put cameras on bomb robots when they go inside buildings, so they can look at the robot.
Right.
Those assets are maybe $250,000-$300,000. Why would you not put a camera on Hubble, which is
Liquor
$1.5
stores
billion?
do it, dude. Liquor stores do it to protect their beer. I mean, come on.
And then he says we don't have a need to look at it. I'm like, wait a minute, okay. So based on where you say Hubble is right now, and where the ISS is, 100 miles below it, why can't the astronauts ever turn around? They should be able to see Hubble with their naked eye, with a DSLR, maybe 400, 500 millimeter telephoto zoom lens. And I got all kinds of excuses from people who want to comment on my channel saying, "Oh, you're so stupid. You need to look at the telemetry data on this sat view, and it shows the Hubble's path. It shows the Hubble's path in ISS. They never come within a distance to each other, even see each other." I'm like, really? Then how is it that you can see the moon 250,000 miles away with your naked eye from ISS, but you can't see Hubble that should be within 60 to 80 miles across the Earth?
Oh, come on, it's ridiculousness.
I mean, it just none of the explanations could stand any sort of serious weight to why it wasn't in the international database. See, the people at NASA says we don't manage the database. I said, yeah, I understand you don't manage it. But you want to tell me why your servicing missions, when you go search the servicing missions, all of them are in there except 2. So why would you put the servicing missions in the international database, but not the actual primary mission where you say you put something up in the sky that's 27,000 pounds? And what makes matters worse, you know how heavy Chandra was 9 years later? Chandra was twice the weight of Hubble, 50,000 pounds. And they say that this thing is actually in the sky. They said that they were able to launch something 50,000 pounds, twice the density and weight and mass of Hubble. But when I went into the international database, guess what? Chandra's not in there either.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, Chandra's not in the international database.
Well, I mean, this just keeps getting better and better. I mean, that when you begin to read the definition of Chandra, it was pretty clear to me that we're not talking about any kind of an optical device or any kind of a telescope in the first place. But the other point I would make is the International Space Station astronauts don't seem to be able to see anything. They can't see satellites. No. They can't see the Hubble. But all those supposed 10 to 20,000 satellites, a good number of them have cameras. So to even try to make the argument that, oh, the ISS astronauts can't do it, well, there's any number of 10 to 20 damn thousand satellites that are armed with cameras, we are told.
Yeah. So and here's the thing: if we're doing intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance and mapping the Earth,
right,
why wouldn't you want to have a real-time photo view? And if there's 13,000 objects below or above the ISS, why, when you see the ISS live footage, you can't see a school bus size object whiz past the ISS?
And not only that, it's got panels, so it's going to reflect sunlight at certain attitudes.
Well, the interesting thing about it is this. I was told, and here's the excuse I was given, Crow. I was told by the HST guy, I said, can you see the Hubble with a telescope? He says, no. He goes, but you could see it at night when the sunlight hits it and it reflects sunlight. I said, whoa, wait a minute. And it dawned on me, because I didn't question him about this at the time. How is it sunlight can reflect off of the Hubble at nighttime? Do you see the ridiculousness in what I just said? How is the sunlight reflecting? How is the sun reflecting light off of the Hubble at nighttime?
Because you're suggesting that the orbit is so low that there would be no direct path to sunlight. Is that what you're suggesting?
Exactly.
But you're suggesting that, giving their globe model, which, I mean, we won't even bother to go there for now. But see, I mean, this is what I constantly tell people, that these frauds and these hoaxes and these lies die under the weight of their own details. But, I mean, when you consider that an identical, not only that, 7 telescopes go on the 747 called Sophia. And I had looked up what Sophia means. It's an ancient kind of occult name, but anyhow, I've forgotten. I got to think of it. But they put the identical scope there, and then they turn around and have the gall to put the data up for someone like you to determine that the infrared ability is actually significantly better looking through supposed atmosphere, the barrier, to space, all these things. None of it makes any sense. None of it.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And when you put them in a position to question them about it, I had to do the phone call because there was no way someone was going to literally be willing to talk to me about it and go through this Socratic method of reasoning and logic and literally say, oh my God, I've been sitting here 25 years and this thing is really not there. I've been lied to.
That's among the greatest YouTube phone calls I've heard. There's a couple up there where people are calling the hoaxes like the Pulse, nightclub BS. But when I heard your phone call and that you had the fortitude to record it, that's one of the better phone calls I'd ever heard, because for some years now I have been stating flat out, ain't no Hubble Space Telescope, ain't no nothing space anything. Nothing is going above low Earth orbit. The problem here is I did it through observation and deductive reasoning, and then taking apart the encoded memes that reside in media and language until I was absolutely satisfied to 98% that what I was saying was correct. What you have now done, what Brian Mullen is now doing, are standing up as very well-educated men of science and challenging what you've been handed, breaking the old paradigm of men of science are a club and we go with the party line. When you guys stand up in the way that you are, in the way that Brian Mullen is, it's going to change the world. Because people are going to probably at first have a problem with what you're saying. Probably scientists are going to have a problem with what you're saying. The ones that are worth their weight in anything are going to go do the detailed work that you did, that Mr. Mullen did, and they're going to come to the same conclusions. I mean, if I asked you point blank right now, does the Hubble Space Telescope exist? Did it ever exist in space?
I'd say no.
Do you think it's demonstrable? Would it stand up in a court of law, in your opinion? Not that I'm faking like you're a lawyer.
Well, here's the thing. I actually have a background in law. I was a pre-law student at first, and I'll tell you something. What I know about doing mock trials in classroom is this. The burden of proof would be put on NASA because I would present all of this evidence, and their motion in mitigation, I would file a motion to compel the court to force them to produce visual real-time evidence that Hubble is where they say it is. And I can guarantee you they will say, Your Honor, we can't produce that evidence. And when the judge says, why can't you? Don't you have something up there? Mr. Bassano has developed a crowdfunding effort to pay for the resources to reallocate of a camera that you say you have up there that can be retasked, take a picture of it, and here's $10 million. They will tell you, well, sir, can we go in the chambers and talk to you about this? That's what would happen. Because the excuses I've been given, none of them hold up. None. And here's the thing. I just searched FAI again. Do you know that when I didn't type in any mission in particular, I typed in Space World Records, greatest mass lifted to greatest altitude. Do you know what the greatest mass was?
What?
It was STS-6 in 1983. It was 20,477 grams. Okay?
What? How much?
It was 27,477 grams.
Okay.
In 1983. It was STS-6. It was the greatest mass lifted to the greatest altitude. Okay?
Yep.
And it was a data and relay satellite. Guess who was on the mission? Story Musgrave. It was a Challenger orbiter. Now, you want to know what the altitude was they reached? Okay?
Yeah.
According to NASA, it went to an orbital altitude of 184 miles. Hubble was supposed to have gone to 331 miles. So you tell me how it is the greatest mass NASA recorded in the international database was a tracking and data relay satellite.
Right. And what about Chandra?
Chandra's not in there.
Well, what I'm saying is, you said Chandra,
yeah, Chandra was 50,000 pounds.
Yeah, even bigger.
50,000 pounds. And
yeah, it's all nonsense.
You do the weight conversions, when you do the weight conversions from kilograms to pounds, you know, 27, let's just say 28,000 kilograms, that's 61,000 pounds.
Damn.
Right? And Chandra was 50,000 pounds. You know, these things should be in a database.
Well,
yeah, so Chandra,
you're just piling on at this point. There's no record of the damn launch. And not only is there no record of the launch, there's no record of a cargo that fits the correct description. And not only that, even though the Chandra is listed, its description does not describe a telescope.
No. It says it's looking at another space. It's investigating another spacecraft technology. So is it looking at Hubble? Is it looking at the ISS? What is it looking at?
Well, I guarantee it's not. Yeah, I guarantee it's not looking at either one of those two things, because those two things are not in space.
Yeah,
I would say
all you have to do is check the servicing missions. Some of the servicing missions are in the international database. Why you put the servicing missions there? And here's another question I had asked. I said, wait a minute. I said to him, if they were servicing the Hubble, okay, did the Hubble come down? Did they wait for the Hubble to come down into an altitude that the ISS, that the shuttle could grab it? Or did they go up to the altitude where Hubble was? There was an inconclusive statement on that one. But
well, what are you implying? Are you implying that the orbit for the Hubble was higher than the ISS is ever supposed to go?
Well, we've never seen a shuttle go higher than the ISS.
I see.
Okay. I mean, there's been missions where you see the ISS flipped upside down and it's looking down at the ISS.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to debate that. My point being is this. When I asked him, okay, so wait a minute, when they capture Hubble, it has no propulsion system. It's supposed to be flying at 17,000 miles an hour. How are they pushing Hubble back up into its supposed orbit? Because according to the laws of physics, a body in motion
tends to stay in motion.
Stays in motion until there's something that stops it.
Yep.
So if they pushed Hubble back up, wouldn't it just keep going? And he didn't have an answer. He says, no, it just stays there. No. 27,000 pounds, if you use, there is no man that can calculate and estimate how much force they need to push on 27,000 pounds in a microgravity environment and really be accurate enough to say, okay, I think if I give it like, 100 pounds of force, because I'm 100, say the guy's astronaut has 200 pounds. He gives 100 pounds of pushing force or 50 pounds of pushing force. 27,000 pounds is going to, if it ain't got nothing to stop it, it's going to keep going. It'll slow down, but it'll keep going.
Well, I mean, the argument here starts to gain ridiculous proportions in the first place, because you are looking at a supposed object in a supposed orbit that had no corrective energy devices, no ion propulsion.
It had some sort of gyroscope.
So that means that it was supposedly put into orbit, BS, and then it degraded the whole time it was there until an STS mission occurred. But anyhow, we're getting close to the top of the hour. I need to get my little dog out, as so many who listen understand my little dog's a heart patient. But when we come back, and I don't know if you want to talk about this, when we met earlier briefly, we talked a little bit about the laser moon incident. Is that something you can address, or is that a little too hot to handle?
Well, I can generally address it, but I'm not comfortable telling you what the document is or what the data says, because I'm still working to clarify and verify a few things.
Then why don't we come back and generalize it with the caveat?
But I can discuss that with regard to the moon, because there was some data that I do have to provide a little bit more clarity on where the moon really could be.
I have Robert Bassano, and we're going to pick up again, having just declared that the Hubble Space Telescope is nonsense, absolute nonsense. And what Robert has done here has brought the first quantifiable data that backs what I have been saying for quite some time. But anyhow, we're going to jump in here now and talk a bit about the moon, and it's a bit astonishing. And while I'm not sure how much, maybe none of the source is going to get revealed that is the basis for this conversation yet, we'll put this caveat. Maybe as time progresses, Robert will release that data or information that at least begins to better fill in the blanks about the origins of what we're going to talk about. But as many have followed me understand, I initially, I don't know how long it's been now, a couple years anyhow, have been, maybe even 3, have been stating that the moon and the sun are not the distance we've been told. At one point, I did a thought experiment using Google Earth to demonstrate that the listed naked eye crater, Aristarchus, which is less than 40 miles in diameter, is supposedly visible to us from almost nearly 250,000 miles away. Using Google Earth, I demonstrated that at 40,000 feet, we can no longer see an object that is 40 miles in diameter. But anyhow, Robert, welcome back to the second hour.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so earlier today when I first met you, having had a friend track you down after I heard the tape of your conversation with the gentleman who spent 20-some years of his life working at Sophia, we were talking about a very interesting piece of data which starts to back up my statement that the moon is not the distance away from us we've been told it is.
Yeah, and you know, without having to go over the data that I actually have, it's not my data, it actually belongs to a particular organization I'm not going to mention right now, but they have the capability to view objects in the nighttime sky in the clearest skies on Earth. But doing the collateral research, I confirmed some of the things that I had been saying before, you know, when I was putting out videos, that when you take the data from NASA claiming that the surface temperature of the moon is a consistent somewhere around 250 degrees in the sunlight and minus 250 degrees in the shade on the dark side, I said, okay, wait a minute, that temperature is consistent. So based on some other data that I got regarding atmospheric sciences, because they send up sounding rockets, all sorts of devices up on balloons to gauge, you know, what the temperatures are from the troposphere all the way up to the thermosphere. Okay, and then beyond that, I just learned yesterday that they don't even use the term exosphere, they use heliosphere.
Which is very telling, because to call something the exosphere implies that it is outside or in space. Yeah. And then when you turn around and call it the heliosphere, I mean, what are we talking about? Is that now the track of the sun or something? It makes very little sense.
What it means is that there is no exosphere. It's the heliosphere, and it's the sun projecting its atmospheric layer down, making the thermosphere at a, you know, the temperatures actually increase the higher you get. So the higher you get, which means the closer you would be getting to the sun, the hotter it's going to get. Yesterday we found out when we had a conversation with the Soho team that the temperatures about 1 million miles away in the Lagrange zone, they're saying that the temperatures have been recorded around 5,800 degrees Kelvin. So the temperatures of the moon in the daylight, when the moon's shining, and they're saying that the sun is reflecting its light onto the moon, but you know, if you want to get into the whole biblical thing, they're saying that 2 lights were created, one for the day, one for the night. And then I've heard theories from other people saying that somehow there may be a plausibility that the sun is actually recharging the moon to get the moon to light up at night. So I'm looking into that. But with regard to the consistent surface temperatures, you know, which are identical on opposite ends of the spectrum,
that temperature is consistent in the middle thermosphere between 150 to 200 kilometers, give or take. Okay? I want to make that clear. Those temperatures are consistent to the middle thermosphere, which is between 150 to 100 to 200 kilometers. Okay?
Okay.
Now, the moon can't be, based on that temperature, the moon can't be at 258,000 miles from the Earth. So when you look at those surface temperatures that NASA's claiming, and you look at what the temperatures are consistent in the thermosphere, based on the data I recovered later from another agency, they shot a laser in 2014 during a supermoon event where the moon was large and it was close, okay?
Yep.
And they confirmed what I thought, that the moon is actually less than 100 miles from the surface of the Earth. So that totally took me for a backward flip, because I had never put out a video saying we never went to the moon. I had been listening to people saying that the moon landings were faked. Stanley Kubrick did it all. They did it on a soundstage. No one's been able to provide any kind of smoking gun for me. But when I started looking at the moon and I confirmed what I had believed, I said, wait a minute. Is it possible they went? Because then I started looking at NASA's footage where they were asked the questions in real time. Remember those interviews that were conducted? Hey, how can you explain how you got through the Van Allen belts? And the astronaut says, well, I don't think we had to ever worry about that. I think somehow we went around them.
Yeah, he didn't even really know.
Yeah.
He didn't know anything about it. It was ridiculousness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then it dawned on me, I'm like, wait a minute. These astronauts are all saying the same thing. And if the Van Allen base are as dangerous as they say they are, and according to the science on the South Atlantic anomaly, there's supposedly the Van Allen belts dip down to 200 to 300 kilometers over in our atmosphere off the coast of Brazil. Wait a minute. The Van Allen belts dip down to 200 to 300 kilometers over the coast of Brazil in the South Atlantic? And they call that the South Atlantic anomaly.
Well, I mean, this all starts to become very ridiculous, because as a former U.S. Marine Corps radio operator, we were trained to bounce radio signals off what's called the ionosphere. I recently went to look up where the ionosphere starts and where it ends, and like everything else, like where space starts, you get all this differing data. But then I got the most up-to-date, supposedly official numbers that they use. And what it said was that the ionosphere, which is charged particles, starts at 30 to 40 miles above sea level. It fluctuates, but it goes out to 1,200 miles. So the supposed ionosphere, which is charged particles, goes into what is supposedly space. And now with what you're pointing out, based on data that these people collect, that would mesh with the Van Allen belt as well. So the Van Allen belt would be not only in space, it would be in our atmosphere, and it would also be going through the thermosphere and part of the ionosphere.
Well, yeah,
it's all nonsense. I mean,
it's all nonsense. If anything, any argument someone can say is that, hey, this is why they call it science. Everyone's saying different things and discovering. We're all trying to put it together to make sense. No, I'm sorry. I don't agree. I'm not going to, don't even push that idea on me, because here's the deal. You got one agency putting out the information, and they're supposed to have access to everything everyone else is doing, and you're supposed to be sharing that information. Don't give me, oh, we're not collaborating as closely as we should be. And with regard to the moon, now I'm thinking, wait a minute. They could have gone to the moon. They could have actually got to the moon. So I never put a video out saying that. But
let me hand you the smoking gun that you're seeking, because you have a very high education and very good math skills. There's a website out there.
Not too high yet.
Well, I'll tell you what. You can deal with what I'm going to hand you here. There's a website called aulis.com, AULIS.com. There's a portion of that website that was posted by a former resident of one of the Ukrainian universities. He's a PhD, and he used parallax method on all the Apollo images, or many of them, to demonstrate that picture that says the mountain range is 5 kilometers behind them is actually only 1,000 feet. And this is using parallax method, which means anyone can take the formula he used. Anyone can take this method any day of the week at their bench, which means the experiment is redoable any day of the week. And what he found and what he illustrates in allus.com is that all of the Apollo images he touched and looked at can be shown to have been shot on a soundstage.
Really?
So, I mean,
I want you to understand, I did say there's a possibility they might have went there. I didn't say that they did. But
right. I would
what I'm saying about the moon is they could have went there. Did they go there? I didn't have enough data to conclusively and definitively say, no, they definitely go. I believe what everyone else is putting out with the data. But there's also data out there for the Naval Research Laboratory. In February of 1954, they conducted upper atmospheric testing, launching rockets based off of the V2 design. And they launched about a dozen rockets to get them to max apogee. And not a single rocket got beyond 73 miles.
There you go. And that sets aside the fact that this is deciding whether or not we went to the moon is a simple deductive reasoning process. And you brilliantly put deductive reasoning and data against the supposed Hubble Space Telescope to demonstrate that it was fraud. If you look at the fact that JFK in the 60s said within this decade we will put a man on the moon and safely return him to Earth in a time where the computing power was less than the average wristwatches these days, they did that in less than 10 years. Matter of fact, I think it was something like 8 years. Now fast forward to the modern era where Bush the Jr. announced we were going to go back to the moon, and it never happened. Not even a step in that direction was made. And then Virgin Galactic came along. I believe Virgin Galactic has been around for about 16 years now. So in the modern age, Virgin Galactic, with the stated mission of simply going to the edge of space and falling back in, not even going into orbit, with modern technology, everything we learned in the 60s, everything that's been learned since the 60s, can't even put a vehicle up to the edge of space and fall it back in after 16 years. And as you just pointed out, those rockets not going above 73 miles begins to illustrate a very strong picture for the fact that there is a hard, fast barrier somewhere around 73 to, I don't know, 90 miles up there. I mean, would you agree with all that?
I'd say around there. I'm saying it's within 100 miles, maybe a little bit more, depending on, the lunar cycle. But it sure as hell ain't beyond 200, 300 miles.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. At one point, I was looking for what's called the, what's the name of the line again that marks space? I'm sorry, the
the Kármán line.
Kármán line, there it is. I was looking for the definitive measure 3 years ago for where space began. And the funny thing was I was getting numbers all over the place, and the lowest numbers were at 60 miles. Was the claim.
That's around the Kármán line.
Yeah, and so, then again, you're looking at the ionosphere, which is charged particles going well into the vacuum of space. Well, how can charged particles be in space? They're particles, which means that's not a vacuum. But I would ask you, in the research that I don't want you to divulge the source until you feel comfortable doing so or not. But how solid do you feel that laser test is marking the distance of the moon on the 2014 supermoon as roughly 99 miles away from us? How accurate do you think that data is going to end up being?
It's extremely accurate because they use that same research facility to shoot laser beams in the nighttime sky, and they say on their own website and on the video they create artificial stars. So if they can create an artificial star that's supposed to be millions of miles away, then they can sure as hell to shoot that same laser at the moon, and they did it. And it was, I'm telling you, I wish I could read it right now, but I'm not ready to put it out there. The moon is not 258,000 miles from the surface of the Earth.
No,
and
it's a context thing. We've all been beaten to think and consider things in a certain way in a certain context.
Yeah.
And as a person who observed the moon for many thousands of hours, when you understand finally to throw out everything that's been told you and go out and test it for yourself, you begin to realize that it is patently ridiculous that you're looking at Jupiter in the quality image you can get that's over 400 million miles away. Doesn't work, and that's what led to the experiment with Google Earth to demonstrate that even at 40,000 miles, that naked eye object called Aristarchus crater is not visible. But I've got to ask you, oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. Where were we going?
Yeah, here's something that's interesting, Crow.
Okay.
We've all seen images of the ISS, and they show photo at a distance of the moon, right? And the moon's really far away.
Yep.
Right? But get this. They're showing, did you ever take notice of the fact that the image they're showing you from the ISS of the moon is below the ISS? Now, some people are going to say, oh yeah, the moon is setting. But get this. Based on what I just told you, the ISS is supposed to be at 245 miles, right?
Yep.
The moon should be within 100, maybe 150 miles. Now you know why they will never pan that camera around in the ISS, because they're afraid one day the moon's just going to come up real fast and they're going to make a mistake and people are going to see it. They're going to be like, whoa, what was that?
Yeah, I kind of feel like we're playing both sides of the fence here because when we talk in this way, we're making the assumption that there is an ISS there. And I'm just making the assumption. Yeah. Right. I think we need to frame this more in a way that demonstrates.
I did a video about the ISS, and that would freak you out for your listeners too, because I actually verified that on NASA's own website, when you go track the ISS, it has the word Zarya in parentheses. So I looked up Zarya. Zarya was the first Russian module launched for the ISS. So the ISS is literally one module. And it's probably 7 modules broken up on balloons, because the oscillation that the ISS supposedly takes, where it rises and lowers in altitude, is the same oscillating elevation and declination activity that a balloon takes. And I have the actual graph data to prove, to compare what the ISS does versus what balloons do, and they do the same exact thing in the thermosphere.
Now that's a damn interesting thing, and here's why. There are some other people who have learned to think like human beings that I follow. Even though he's not very popular and a lot of people like to take issue with him, the Jungle Surfer has said for a long time that it's clear we can see a light up there called the ISS. It's clear we can see the scheduling of it coming around, which is true. I can verify that for myself. But he actually, in one of his videos some years ago, made the statement, how are they doing? I wondered if it could be done with a balloon. And I have been at odds with my own brain trying to figure out how that light is operating up there, knowing damn well there's no ISS to back it. So what you're saying is you can show the same supposed orbital oscillation pattern that a balloon at high altitude has already been clocked doing.
The balloons, they show the actual, I've got the printed data from NASA's Wallet program, and it was dated 2014. They launched a balloon, and it was a 14-day operation. They launched it on the 14th. It went up to 150,000 feet, and then during the evening time, because of, helium expands in hot weather and thermal environments, but then in the evening, the balloon dropped 60 to 80,000 feet, and then during the day, it went back up, and then it dropped again 60 to 80,000, 100,000 feet, went up again, came down, and the ISS is literally, when it makes its orbit supposedly around the Earth, it's literally, when you look at the real-time data on the European Space Agency's website to track the ISS, you will see in just a few minutes, you will see the ISS lose anywhere between 1 to 2 miles of altitude and go back up and come back down and go back up. That is identical to what Antarctic balloon launchers are doing. And they're also launching satellites on balloons, on a 100-foot tether. They bring them up in the sky, they do their thing, they come crashing down on a parachute, they repackage it up and send it back up again. And I contacted some guys who were amateur radio
radio operators, they do nothing but track supposedly space assets. And I contacted a guy overseas and I said, listen, I need you to do me a favor. Here goes 4 supposed satellites in orbit. I want you to get their data. Here's their data. And then I need you to track these for 14 to 35 days. And let me know if after those time, if you've lost the signal, and tell me how long you lost the signal for. And lo and behold, it was the same amount of time that they send up a balloon and then it comes back down.
Wow.
Meaning that when one comes down, they send another one back up. Let me tell you, they spend billions of dollars on the balloon program, and guess what? NASA is actually running short of helium.
Right.
Now, why do they need all that helium for?
The whole world is running short of helium.
Because that's how you got to operate the actual. Google Loon, Loon, describes exactly how the satellite program is actually working for communications. Look at Google Loon.
Describe it.
Here's what Google is describing with their balloon program. They're saying they're going to bring internet to the entire world, launching balloons up into where the jet stream is in the thermosphere, and that these balloons will have the capability to have some sort of propulsion systems on them to move them from one layer to another layer to provide communications, meaning that they will stay along the jet stream which goes around the world, or the thermosphere. They'll be moving at high speeds, providing telecommunications, internet, radio operations, all of that. They'll be out of sight. You won't be able to see these. The guy on Google says the only way you'll be able to see these is with a high-powered telescope. But get this. At nighttime, you don't see these balloons. All you see is the actual device itself being reflected. And if it's at 150,000 feet, your naked eye and your telescope is going to tell you, wait a minute, that's a satellite coming overhead. But you don't see the tether, because the tether is a specific color that can't be seen at night. That's why when they do these orbital paths, they make sure they need to know the lunar cycle. They need to make sure that whatever they got up in the air, no one will ever see it pass in front of the moon, because then you'd see the tether. You'd see the balloon.
Yeah, but that's really, I've thought about exactly what you're saying. The problem with that becomes this. It would be some pretty advanced calculations, because you would have to assume that if I was still in San Diego looking at the moon and they knew for a fact Crrow was out there every night with his telescope, which I used to be, that they don't want Crrow filming this, so they would calculate that. But now fast forward to someone in Houston, Texas. That's a whole different line of sight. How difficult would it be to try to block every line of sight all the way across the country? You see what I'm getting at? It would be near impossible, it seems.
Yeah, but if you recorded the moon for as long as you can remember, you know that it has a set path. So you basically design these assets to take a path to avoid the moon during specific operational times.
Right. Well, I got to be honest with you. I've filmed a lot of odd things. Even the thing I call the boomerang, which to me clearly looks like it's being controlled in some way. A lot of people have said it looks like 3 balloons tied together in some way. Were we talking about some other thing that had to do with balloons as well earlier?
Yeah, I was talking about how they were launching the satellites up, and the issue that we were talking about with regard to the moon, when you were talking about the lunar wave.
Yep.
I take the lunar wave as it's literally a heat wave that the moon, because of where the moon is.
In the thermosphere.
It's in the thermosphere. So
right.
I went away from the idea of it being in liquid, because superfluid liquid helium brought down to almost absolute zero. Absolute zero, close to absolute zero, doesn't exist up in the thermosphere. Only the end of the mesosphere, where the temperature is minus 50 degrees Celsius. So I got rid of the idea that area, that's where the moon was, based on the distance. And but could it be at higher altitudes? It is a possibility that space, there's a because I was asked this question by one and asked me. He says, well, what kind of densities are you talking about if you're thinking that dark matter could actually be superfluid helium at absolute zero? And this is what scientists are trying to figure out right now. What is dark matter? They actually termed it dark fluid. There's literally a physics website that actually described dark matter, aka dark fluid. And then they've done an experiment with superfluid helium in a research-controlled experiment environment, and they injected particles inside the helium to almost absolute zero, and they fired a laser inside, and you see all of these little star-like kind of things inside the superfluid helium. I did a video comparison, okay, with STS footage of showing space with things flying by because they turn on that infrared camera.
Yeah.
And I put it side by side with the superfluid helium experiment that was conducted at the University of Maryland. And people who saw the video says they couldn't tell the difference of what was space and what was in the laboratory.
Wow. You know, it's funny you should mention that because, I mean, starting in like the end of the 90s, they started publishing on all like their sky and telescope that 85% of the space was missing, and they kept calling it dark matter. So it almost, you got to wonder if this is going to become the excuse when they finally divulge that it is liquid or whatever it is, you know, that they were fooled.
Well, NASA's considering it. I talked to them about it, and they said, hey, what kind of densities are you talking here, Robert? When they said that, that means that I came up with an idea that they're actually wanting to entertain. Because they don't know.
Well, that's further evidence that they've never been above low Earth orbit, though. Again.
Well, here's the thing. When I asked if there were temperature sensors on the ISS, and she didn't know, and I said, well, what do you think the temperatures are? She says to me, minus 200 and plus 200. I'm like, okay, well that has to be that's in the thermosphere. That's where the moon could be. And that's when I knew right then and there, this is going to be blown out of the water.
Well, that's the other thing. If the moon was truly, you know, marked at 99 miles away, there's more evidence that no one ever walked on it, because that means it's frickin' tiny. You know, it wouldn't classify as a planetary body or even the moon of a planetary body. It would be basically a small meteorite. Think about it. If it's 99 miles away, how big would it be? I mean, you could probably do the math to estimate what a half a degree of sky that we see is at 99 miles. But my point would be, is it would be nowhere near the size we're told, which is what, 1/4 the size of Earth or something like that?
Yeah.
So none of it works. I mean, if you logically take it down, but you know, I'll stand on that to the day I die. The moon just simply is not as far as we've been told, and some of the data that you're uncovering here totally backs that. And Brian Mullen, the engineer, you know, he's all about the thermosphere, and his work with the thermosphere is very close to what you're saying, but he has come to the conclusion that it's probably liquid. I think he labeled it as H2O. But I mean, if any of what we're talking about is true, what it means is NASA's inception was for the express purpose of lying to us and ensuring that we know nothing about what is called space. That's as clear as day, because for them to have landed anything on a comet, they've had to go through all that space. For them to have gone to the moon, they can't discover a new Van Allen belt, which they did a few years ago, because they've already been through the Van Allen belt like 9 times. You see, all these logical deductions we can make based on the data they have given us prove the fraud. In my mind, I mean, at this point, what you just told me about balloons blows my mind, because you have a 1-to-1 matching algorithm of balloons matching an oscillation rhythm that has already been shown that the ISS oscillates in the same way, right? To me, that is mind-blowing. So I have to ask you, along with everything else you've said, do you accept that do you accept that there are 10 to 20,000 satellites orbiting in space?
Not where they classify space, possibly, but all on balloons.
So that would be under the thermosphere in our atmosphere.
I'd say on the edge of the thermosphere, because they do have balloons the size of football fields that can go to, from what someone told me, they can go to almost 1,000 miles. I don't know how big that would need to be, but I know that Echo 1 was launched on a rocket. The rocket reached its limit. Echo 1 kept kept going, and then a balloon 135 meters wide actually deployed, and Echo 1 stayed up in the air on a balloon for almost 8 years.
Did you ever see any images of that thing? Do you have any
Yeah,
idea?
Yeah, they show the
what color
vintage
is it?
footage.
What color is it?
It's a silver color.
So it would reflect light.
Yeah, well, not only would it reflect light, but the Air Force actually described it in their radio announcement. This will be the first time that man has communicated a signal from the ground to a man-made moon. That's what they said.
Wow, I didn't know anything about that, but my point would be my equipment would easily see something like that without even using an eyepiece, just using the scope as a camera lens. I could easily see that. As a matter of fact, my telephoto would see that. That's crazy, man. It goes to show, so many people have contacted me over the years, asking me about telescopes, saying they want to get into it, what system is the best and all these things. But I would point out, just based on the things we've talked about here, anyone getting a decent set of optics, even a telescope that's 4 inches or so, and just scanning the daytime sky has the potential to gather incredible data. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do.
I mean, we're talking, how big was that balloon again? 134?
They said it was 135 meters across.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah, it's huge. They show pictures of it. Just type in Echo 1.
Yeah,
they show the side. It takes up it literally takes up most of the space inside of a large blimp hangar.
Yeah, I take notes as I do this because I try not to get too much keyboard tapping. I noticed in a few of my shows all you can hear is keyboard tapping, and that's kind of sucks. But is there anything else you want to cover? Do you think there are some other critical things we should touch on? And let's take a minute to talk about the lunar wave and your concepts of it. I know we touched on it basically when I first met you on the phone to see if this would be a good fit to do this show. As you know, because I know that you had been following my work for some time, I initially tried to use the language of hologram and quickly realized that was absolutely the wrong way to go. Switched over to using the word facade and then discovered that was absolutely the wrong way to go. And now, and for some time now, I have been describing what I believe the moon to be as emanating something that emanates its own light and is not a rock in orbit. You had some interesting ideas earlier, and I thought you were going to be leaning towards some kind of liquid in the thermosphere as a cause of the wave, but it sounds like that may not be where you're at. So, I mean, you've seen the wave. It's a thing that covers the moon, always in pairs.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I'm thinking two things here. That it's definitely a heat wave, and it potentially. If someone else is doing it, I think that it possibly could be created artificially. If someone were looking through it through a camera or telescope, you could put an artificial heat source, like say a cup of tea or something like that, under the actual lens.
In the telescope?
No, not in the telescope, but maybe get a heat source right next to the telescope that would actually, like say, a heat gun.
Well,
and put it across the telescope, and you.
Yeah,
I haven't done it, but I'm just saying.
I gotta stop you right there because what
I
have used.
I'm just saying the one that you got from that one individual.
Well, wait a minute. Let me just describe this. I use an SCT, Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope, as do a number of the other people who have shot the wave. The problem here is with a Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope, I can put my whole head in front of my telescope, and all you see is a dimming of the light. So many people looked at footage that I had shot and said that's a bug on your lens, and they don't understand how the Schmidt-Cassegrain telescopes work, where it's not possible to see anything that close to the telescope. As a matter of fact, things are not even in focus until they're many, many miles away. But a bug or my hand or even my whole head in front of my telescope when it's focused on, say, the moon, you don't see a head, you don't see anything except a slight dimming because my head's so big it blocks a lot of light. And it's not even the dimming you would expect from seeing a whole head in front of an 8. First I used an 8, now I use an 11-inch aperture. You can still see the damn moon with my whole head in front of the front aperture. So I would just suggest that anyone who's using that kind of system, there is no physical possible way to put anything in or around the scope to get that effect. And not only that, in the 2012 footage, the wave is filmed as it begins, the telescope pans above the wave, and then the wave catches up to the telescope, which is also kind of demonstrating that it is filming something, but as I just described, it couldn't be generated in that way. It would have to be software faked or something like that, I think. I don't.
There's a possibility. I'm still researching this, Crrow. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I mean, I'm coming up with not theories, but viable and plausible possibilities. I am sticking to the fact that the upper atmospheres, I'm not sure what layer, superfluid helium is there, because it's zero viscosity. Zero viscosity, meaning that if you dropped a bowling ball in a pool of this, you wouldn't know what you dropped it in.
It would be completely invisible.
It would be invisible, and the bowling ball would just all of a sudden stop. And you'd be like, what's just stopped it? You wouldn't know what it was.
Would the bowling ball go into it and be surrounded by it?
It would be surrounded by it, but you wouldn't see that. You wouldn't see any wave. You wouldn't see any viscosity type of behavior.
Right.
See, when they did these experiments, they said that, there's these existing quantum vortices, like hurricanes, whirlpools, all moving in one direction. It's not behaving like traditional liquid does at almost 0 degrees Fahrenheit. It's not behaving that way. I thought maybe the moon could be in this. No, the moon's not. The sun's not. But somewhere in one of our layers of our atmosphere, that environment exists. That environment exists.
And why do you think that's correct?
Well, I started matching it up with what they're finding out with regard to dark matter and dark fluid. They when they started calling it dark fluid, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. What else could be combined with this to make it completely black? Where literally, because look, Vanta Black was created by Surrey Nanosystems. They created this substance out of carbon nanotubes, which absorbs 99.96% of all visible light. Astronauts claim when they get at altitude, even when you go up in a balloon, you look up at the sky, all you see is what you believe to be the sun, but you don't see the billions of stars they say that you can see from the ground, from the surface of the Earth. Now the stars, I'm sticking to my claim that the stars are actually within a specific layer of our atmosphere, because when you go up in a balloon, you don't see any stars above you. You don't see no stars below you. So they're somewhere down lower, but not reflecting outward. They're reflecting downward. The stars are reflecting downward. And they're fixed, which means they might not even be stars at all. Yeah, they're flickering, but so does a giant diamond from a distance as well.
Right. Well, I think these are valid points. I think there's so much work being done that begins to show the idea that something's 1,000 light years or 100,000 light years. It's ridiculous. It's this construct that steals your ability to locate your place in the scheme of things. It becomes so overwhelmingly big, you can't get your arms around it, and you become powerless to understand your place in the scheme of things. Wherein, if they are truly lights and the moon is only within 100 miles of us, or the stars are a layer, which many artists are claiming is true, because we don't see the distance between them change as they change their apparent position. From our point of view, many artists are claiming that proves they're on a 2D plane. But I mean, are we talking about the same dark matter that started cropping up in the late 90s, where they claimed that some 80 or 90% of the known universe was made of this missing material called dark matter?
Yeah, and that's interesting you say that, because that's the claim of how much water is on Earth, about 70%. And that's how much water is actually in the human body, about 70%. So I could see where Brian's going, that it's got to be some sort of water fluid type environment. But when you look at the science of fluid dynamics and start studying that, superfluid helium makes more sense than water, because when you're talking about high altitudes, water vaporizes and boils at high altitudes. It boils. So it can't be that type of water, and maybe it's just some sort of denser type of
fluid environment, but the denser type of fluid environment would be superfluid helium.
Now, can superfluid helium be brought back to its gaseous form?
Yeah, it can. You just let it basically come back to ambient room temperature.
So you would be thinking, or I would be thinking, that if in fact there was a layer up there that was made of this substance, they'd be mining it.
That's true.
You know, it seemed like a logical thing. I mean, they made up this whole silly story about helium-3 on the moon, and that, you know, a teaspoonful could power Paris for 100 years or some ridiculousness. That was one of the stories they put forward about the moon. But I wanted to, I had a note here that I didn't ask you as you were talking about it. You know, a lot of people have been talking about this company that can make artificial stars. Do you know what the stated purpose is for making artificial stars? Do you know why they claim they're doing it? What the function is?
You know, that's interesting. I'm still looking into that too. I know two companies that can do it: the Obayashi Corporation and Ale in Japan.
Yeah.
They create artificial light shows, suns, distant. They can create distant suns and distant planets.
So does it seem like it's like an entertainment thing, or
it's an entertainment thing? But ready for this? They partnered up with the U.S. Strategic Space Command back in the 50s.
There you go.
You can be guaranteed the U.S. gave them the technology, and they said they can do it anywhere in the world. You just pay them somewhere between $9,250 per star, and literally, if you wanted a shooting star light show over your house tonight, they just give them the longitude and latitude, and they send this thing up, and they'll do it for you.
Now, so that's like a meteor shower. Do they also do fixed bodies that would appear to be?
They do fixed bodies. They can create distant suns and distant planets and distant everything.
You know,
they say it on their website. They say it.
I'll tell you. You know, I got to make this comment. All these people who are interested in getting a telescope right now, you could contribute by simply going and getting images from the modern era now of the night sky and going back to images that were supposedly taken in the 50s or the 60s or the 70s and doing meticulous comparisons. I have often wondered, when I began to think about the lunar wave, think that I had already come to the conclusion the moon is not nearly as far away as we've been told, that it wouldn't be possible for a human being to set foot on it in the first place. This is my view. I began to consider, was it always like this? Or was there a change at some point? And when you begin to consider a company that could make a false sun in the sky or a false planet or a false star, you've really got to be questioning what truly would be behind the need to do this at all.
You know, that's what I ask myself. Why would they need to create fake anything? I mean, why would somebody want to pay that kind of money to do that? And the only logical explanation I can come to is nothing is real. I put up a video talking about simulated universe. Nothing is real. You got astrophysicists and theoretical physicists and philosophers on a stage together talking about the very science they're pushing in our faces, and then they're questioning themselves. Could what we be doing be real, or are we just making this up? And quantum strings, and he believes that we're living in a computer simulation. Why, if you're a theoretical physicist and you're an astrophysicist and you make your money and your life on telling people, yeah, that's Venus, that's Saturn, and then you're going to tell me that there's a possibility that none of that is real? I'm sorry. It was so comical. That's why I made a joke out of it and putting up that video, because it completely contradicts the whole idea of astrophysics even existing, period.
Well, you know, I'll tell you what, man. In the last few months, I've been shot so many videos. There's some really kind of astounding work being done on the fake Pulse nightclub shooting. People making calls similar to the one you made. When I first heard, you know, I'd been sent the video a few times, finally saw a mirrored version of your phone call with the Sophia guy. And I said to myself, if this is legit, this is really a milestone. This is a marker that begins to demonstrate that people with good, strong science educations are now challenging what we have been handed. And if that continues to progress, where more Brian Mullards and more Robert Bassanos come and do what you guys have started, the frauds that we see, the lies that we see will not hold up. They cannot hold up. They will all die under the weight of their own details. And so that is really, why I went straight away to see if I could locate you, to see if I could talk to you. And I want people to go to Robert's channel and listen to that recorded conversation, that telephone conversation between Robert and the 23-year whatever flight director, whatever his title is at SOFIA, the 747 platform for telescopes. The way that you held that conversation and how you held your own on a scientific level and how you held your own with a man of NASA who's probably very well versed in some mathematics that most of us will never even think about. But what's more is the whole time I'm expecting you to just say this is BS, this is fraud, and you don't do it. You go all the way 20 some minutes into that call before you finally say, I've come to the conclusion that the Hubble Space Telescope does not exist and that SOFIA has been taking all the images. And I was just like, you know what? I wanted to stand up and applaud because I don't watch movies anymore, so I don't have anything to applaud for. I do watch movies, but I think you catch my drift. But I would just say thank you for recording that and having the fortitude as a science-based individual, having the guts to stand up and challenge what other scientists supposedly have put forward as truth. We're coming to the end of the second hour here. Is there anything you would like to cover before we call this an episode?
No, not really. I mean, if people want to take a gander at what I put out, it's not for all audiences, especially for those who are 18, 17 or younger. It's for mature audiences only, most of the content. I did put out some videos specifically for families regarding some literature that was put out in 1929 titled, they did some research on a bunch of children. It's called Children's Concept of the World. And these kids were asked to describe the world they live in, and the responses were absolutely incredible. They were actually far more complex and advanced than PhDs working at NASA. One kid actually described, a 9-year-old, says, how do you believe the sun actually works? And he says, I believe the sun drops through from Europe down below, and the sun sets, and it goes through a hole in the center and lights up the rest of the other side of the planet. And I was like, whoa, that was the most interesting thing I ever heard. And they actually showed a picture of what that model would look like. And it was a flat plane surface where the sun literally went around in a circle around the top layer and dropped through somehow into the bottom layer to light up the lower layer. And then somehow it found its way back around and come back up on top again. Wow. How about that?
Wow.
Yeah, so that's for a family to review. There were actually social science research studies done. But the rest of the videos, I'm putting them together in such a way to lead up to that one big reveal. Because I found out yesterday that every single government agency, aerospace company, they use a particular mathematical model titled FEM, Flat Earth Model. NASA has this science in their software applications. They use it all the time. They discuss it, the National Reconnaissance Office. And I asked finally yesterday to have it clarified, and the guy told me at the SOHO team, he says, yeah, we use that mathematics because it refers to a fixed frame of reference that we can use to study everything else. And I say, wait a minute, so you're saying fixed frame of reference, so you're saying the only thing you know is the ground you walk on. And you have to use this math because there's no science for spherical math.
That's comedy.
And that's basically what he's confirming, that there's no science for spherical math. Is there curvature to the Earth? I believe so. My model that I've agreed with, that I've found out based on the International Ellipsoid Reference System, is that the Earth is undergoing flattening. Okay, it's undergoing continual flattening, which to me, if the outer atmospheres are rotating at high speeds consistently, when you look at that from a centrifugal standpoint, eventually it starts to change shape and you increase the pressure. So there's increased pressure being put on the planet. If you get at a specific altitude,
you're going to see the outer curvature based on a 23.5 degree or 24 degree tilt. And that's why you see that. People say it's because of fisheye lenses and yada yada. No. No one has ever seen the Earth with their own eyes, unaided by an optical object at high altitude.
That's right.
Why is that? Because we're being told that if you go up at high altitude like that and you don't have anything covering your eyes or your face, you will implode. That's what they're telling us. So they've scared the hell out of us and telling us, no, you people can't go there. We need to go there in special vehicles, special aircraft. And I'm sorry, but we can't take you up there to see this. You're just going to have to trust us. And, you know, Mr. Picard did it. And he saw something. But a lot of his information is being suppressed. They don't want anyone to know. They don't want anyone to know. The Earth can't be 25,000 miles in circumference from the equator. I believe that's the internal structure of the land masses. That's not the entire Earth. I believe it to be much larger, because if they really are giving us a view at 200 plus miles, they never show you the entire Earth.
No, you're never gonna. And not only that, we know that a Mercator projection map warps the size and actual shape of a continent. Many people have said it was because the ruling class in Europe wanted their tiny countries to look better. Some people have said it was done so we had straight navigation lines for ships. But what I can tell you is most people are not aware that, you know, like Greenland is something like actually in square miles 3 times or 4 times, I forget what it is, bigger than Africa. But what we see is when we look at the Mercator projection of something like South America and then look at the snapshot of Earth from supposedly Apollo 17, they look pretty close. So how is that possible? It's not possible. But anyhow, my friend, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Please quickly tell people your YouTube channel. We got to wrap up for the top of the hour.
My YouTube channel is Planate Veritas. It's actually Planate Veritas, Veritas. If you search it on YouTube, you have to enter it in all capital letters. It's the Latin term for flat plane truth.
All right, man. Hey, Robert, thank you so much for having the fortitude to record that call with the NASA gentleman. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I give everyone the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I give those guys respect. You know, they might have learned some things new that they didn't know about and start questioning things. But I do learn a tremendous amount from them. And because I've been trying to ask these questions on the university level, and I'm not getting definitive and conclusive answers that can be accepted.
Well, so, you know, I thought I was learning a lot from NASA over the years, and if I could offer to teach them one thing, it would be this: go get your crash helmets, because the huge lies you have been telling us are going to come crashing to Earth pretty quick.
Yeah.
But anyhow, my friend, that covers probably what will be episode 13 on Crrow777 Radio, and I will be in touch and monitoring your channel. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll be doing the same. Take care, Crow.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.